There's a silent tragedy going on right now, at this very moment. Millions of people are trapped in a mental labyrinth, running after a way out that never existed. They wake up in the middle of the night with their hearts wrapped, thinking about a problem that hasn't even happened yet, are paralyzed in the face of simple decisions, analyzing unlikely scenarios as if they could see the future. And at the end of the day, even without having done anything concrete, feel exhausted. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Concern does not protect. She just paralyzes, is not a shield against failure, not even pain insurance. Most of the time, it's an invisible current that keeps us stuck in the same place while we believe we are moving forward. Mountain Michel, one of the most lucid thinkers in history, noticed this centuries ago. He lived in a chaotic time, marked by wars, diseases, and infections, yet refused to live tormented by worries. For him, the fear of the future was a poison that consumed the present. Why suffer twice? One by what happens, and another for which it may never happen. Modern science confirms what Montaigne already included. Excess concern, corruptly. Studies show that ruminating on problems constantly activates the same brain areas associated with physical pain. Chronic anxiety reduces our ability to solve problems, impairs memory, and even shortens life. However, most people continue to believe that think too much, it's a sign of responsibility, when in fact it is a destructive addiction. But there is a curious paradox here. Once we stop worrying, the answers appear. The path draws itself. The great, mankind's advances did not come from the extreme tension, but gives mental clarity. Mozart lightly composed his symphonies. Einstein said his best ideas appeared when he was relaxed. Great Stoics like Seneca and Marco Aurelio believed that one peaceful spirit always sees further. Then why do we insist on carrying this burden? What mountain and so many other sages understood that it still escapes us? In this video, let's the illusion of worry expose what it really does to our minds and, most important, find out how to get rid of her. The first step is to understand what's really going on inside our head. Because maybe your concern isn't yours. Maybe it's just a noise, an old schedule that needs to be broken. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. In 1563, a young Frenchman traveled to Paris in search of answers. He wanted to understand the world, decipher the chaos, and find some certainty amidst the confusion of life. But the more I studied, but I realized a disconcerting truth. Human beings never know as much as they think they do. His name was Mountain Michel, and this realization would shape his entire philosophy. Man walks on ropes weaker than. Imagine, centuries later, neuroscience would confirm what a mountain I had ever noticed. The human brain hates intelligence. He's a machine that search for patterns and predictability, and when you don't find them, we create narratives about the future. We believe in failed predictions and deceive ourselves, thinking that when we care, we are getting ready. But here's the problem. Concern does not give us control. It just gives us the feeling of control. And this illusion comes at a high price. All obsessive thinking follows the same structure. First, a problem arises, real or imaginary. The brain, in your eagerness to protect, activates the amygdala, the region responsible for fear. The nervous system goes on alert. The heart accelerates, the cortisol rises. The whole body prepares to act. But there is a problem. There is no action to be taken because the threat is not real. Concern is a false alarm that never turns off. Like an app running in the background. draining all system power. Mountain saw it almost comically. He said that we spend our lives suffering for things that will never happen, and that in the end, fear of pain is worse than pain itself. The scenic historical philosopher had a similar idea. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And it's not just philosophers who think like that. Modern studies show that 85% of concerns never materialize. The most ironic, not 15% of cases where something bad actually happens. People report that they handled it better than they imagined, i.e., the brain suffers by anticipation. But when the time comes, discovers that it was all an exaggeration. This raises one fundamental question. To worry is to move forward. Mountain was skeptical, and asceticism is a powerful tool against anxiety. He distrusted absolute certainties, including our inner certainties, about what will happen. When a negative thought arose, he wondered, and if I'm wrong? The Stoics used a similar approach, more reversed. Instead of fighting the lack of certainty, accepted. Born Marco Aurelio, the philosopher emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "Don't waste time discussing what it means to be a good person. Be the point of both. The concern is theoretical. Life is practice. You can spend years predicting disasters that will never arrive, or you can just live and react when necessary. A man who plans all the details of your life to avoid chaos does not realize that in an attempt to avoid a mistake, commit the greatest of all, he wastes his own life. Worrying isn't just worrying, it's destructive." Neuroscientist Ethan Kross research show that magnetic rumination activates the prefrontal cortex out of control, overloading the mind and reducing the ability to make decisions. The result: the more we think, less we act. The more we plan, the less we perform. Montaigne realized this in practice. He turned away from politics and took refuge in your library, where he wrote essays on the human condition. For years, studied how people lived in torment by unreal problems, and concluded that the secret to a better life is not in solving all the consonants, but oil the. He was not alone. Shakespeare, Hamlet, puts it in the mouth of its protagonist, the phrase that sums it all up. Nothing is good or bad, but thought does. Worrying is a way to try, control the uncontrollable, but the world will always be. Accepting this is to cross. The question now is, how to turn this acceptance into strength? How to make intelligence an ally and not an enemy? Something profoundly unfair happens with those who try too hard, or poison that you obsessively check loses performance in the test. The speaker who wants to sound smart stutters in front of the audience. The athlete who trembles with fear of defeat misses right at the beginning. There is one cruel logic here. The more we try to control one result, the further we get away from him. Mountain saw this with success as one mental arrest. He believed that life was made of flow, and who try to imprison in a rigid sequence of expectations was a recipe for frustration. The man who tries too hard to hold the current of the river ends up drowning in it. And he was right. Modern science shows that there is a point where excess effort becomes an obstacle. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, creator of the flow concept, studied athletes, artists, and scientists, and realized that your best magnetic performance just when they stopped trying so hard. The brain entered a state of active relaxation, and the actions flowed without resistance. But most people do the opposite. They believe that concern is synonymous with uncertainty. What anxiety means commitment. and thus hang themselves on their own excess of effort. The great paradox of concern is this: the more you care, but lax, the more relaxed, more accurate. In Greek mythology, Icarus had wax wings and feathers. Your dashing father warned him not to fly, not too low, not too high, but intoxicated by the feeling of power. Icarus disobeyed and rose too high. The sun melted its wings and it fell into the sea. History always was told as a warning against arrogance. But there is one detail that few realize. If Icarus had thought too much about danger, would also have fallen. Fear of failure often generates failure. It happens because the brain, when with avoiding a mistake, ends up focusing exactly on him. The phenomenon is known as magnetic irony. When we try to suppress a thought, he comes back even stronger. For example, try not to think of a white bear saw. You are thinking of him. He's in your head. Damn white bear. Mountain and knew it. He said, that man, worried, is always trapped between two extremes. If you don't try hard, feel guilt. If you try too hard, wears out. The answer: stop seeing life as an exam and start to see it as a process. In a classic study from the University of Chicago, researchers tested basketball players. In the first group, athletes simply threw the ball freely. No second were instructed to hit the basket at any cost, because every mistake would cost points. The result: the second group missed much more. This happens because the prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious thinking, is overloaded when we try to control every detail of our actions. The result is that we lose what psychologists call efficient automation, the state in which body and mind work in harmony. No excessive ego interference. Mountain already understood this principle. For him, living well was learning to trust one's instinct, without trying to control everything. In your words, we often get lost more trying to find each other. This brings us to an essential question: how to let go without becoming negligent. How to care less without being irresponsible. There is a fundamental error in the way most people cope with your challenges. They confuse care with concern. Caring means acting in the present. Do what is necessary without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Worry if it means suffering in anticipation. Expend energy trying to predict the difference between the two is in the intention. The first flows, or second, paralyzed. Mountain believed that much of the wisdom. I was learning this doctrine. He saw excess concern as a symptom of arrogance, the human desire to control the uncontrollable. For him, the secret was to find the balance between involvement and this idea takes us to the next point: the power of acceptance. Like Mountain, the Stoics and even Zen saw acceptance not as resignation, but as a strategy, because in the end, freedom is not in having control over everything, is in learning to release. There is a common scene in ancient and modern tragedies, or protagonist, after fighting everything and everyone, realize you lost. He spent years trying to change the immutable, trying to control what was never under your control, and in the end, falls on its knees, blue, accepting defeat. But something strange happens at this moment. When he releases, the weight disappears. When he accepts, finds an unexpected freedom. Montaigne saw this clearly. For him, the wise man is not the one who rules the world, but the one who stops fighting him. He does not see acceptance as withdrawal, but as a strategy. He understands that some things need to be loose, so that others can grow. He who clings to what already escapes condemns himself to eternal torture. Science confirms this. Studies show that it mentally restricts a negative emotion only strengthens it. The more we try to ward off uncomfortable thinking, but he comes back, that's because the brain interprets the resistance as a danger sign. And everything dangerous deserves attention. What mounts? The Stoics and even Buddhist monks understood. It's something radical. Releasing is not losing, is to gain space to live. There is a Zen story that illustrates this principle. A man falls into the sea during a storm. He fights the waves desperately to keep your head above water. But the current is stronger. He struggles to exhaustion, swallowing water, sinking more and more, until, in a moment of surrender, he too, your body relaxes, and instead of being to the bottom, he called. Life works the same way. The more we resist what we cannot change, the more we suffer. The more we accept, the more we find room to breathe. Mountain realized this in its own experience. He lived in a period of religious wars, goblin plague, and political instability. But unlike many of his contemporaries, has not been consumed by paranoia. He understood that some tragedies are inevitable, but the additional suffering we create in the mind, this one, is flexible. The same idea appears in historical philosophy. Epictetus said that there are two categories of things in life: those we can control and those we can't. The error, human is expending energy in the second category. And here's the trick. The more we accept what we cannot change, more energy we have to change what we can. This may seem counterintuitive. After all, since we are little, we are taught to never give up, to fight to the end. But there is a difference between intelligent effort and blind resistance. The psychologist Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists." Neuroscience explains this clearly. When a person tries to ignore a thought, your brain activates neural circuits even more, linked to that idea. That's why suppressing emotions never works. Those who try not to feel angry only become more angry. Who tries not to worry only sinks deeper into anxiety. Mountain realized this centuries before modern science. He wrote that the best way to deal with fear is not running away from him, but look at it from the front. We get used to facing what terrifies us. We lose the habit of fearing it. The Stoics called it love, fati, the love of fate. Accept not only the good, but also the bad. No resistance. Oh, curious, when we stop competing, things change naturally. Anger passes. Anxiety loses strength. Pain finds room to heal. Here is where many make mistakes. They confuse acceptance with inertia. But accepting reality does not mean giving up arms. It means acting clearly, without being hostage to destructive emotions. A Stoic general who loses a battle don't cry over the map. He accepts what happened and uses its energy to reorganize the troops. A citizen facing a crisis does not despair trying to change what has already been done. He adapts his strategy and moves on. Mountain saw life in the same way. He believed that wisdom lacks lightness, not the weight. It is to carry what can be left on the ground. The question now is, how to turn this philosophy into practice. How to train the mind to release what is not useful and focus on what really matters. Two people fall off a cliff. First debate in the air, trying to grab something invisible. Your arms move in despair, as if it were possible to avoid the impact. The second, on the other hand, accept the fall. Your body comes loose, gives in to the wind, and when it hits the ground, rolls instead of audio. The result, the first one bursts, the second survives. The difference between the two was not luck. It was Mountain understood this principle. He realized that life drags us along like a river, and that trying to hold back the margins is an act of illusion. The man suffers because you believe you possess what was never yours. The paradox is fascinating. The more we try to control life, the more we suffer, the more we let go, but free we become. Teaches that all suffering is born of attachment. But it is not just about the attachment to material things. We stick to expectations, to identities, to certainties, to people, and even our own thoughts. Or problem, all this is transitory. Life is not static. Nothing is permanent. Mountain said the only real certainty is change. A leads to breakage, flexibility to survival. Neuroscience proves this. Studies show that emotional resistance, i.e., the act of fighting unpleasant realities, active brain regions linked to physical pain. The more a person insists on something that is already gone, greater suffering. But there is an even more intriguing detail. Not only reduces pain, but makes room for, as always, and growth. No Gao. There's a concept called Hu Wei, which can be translated as effortless action. Is the idea that things flow better when we stop trying to force them. An artist who relaxes while painting creates better than that he who cares too much with every stroke. A musician who surrenders to sound plays better than the one who analyzes each note with. Nature gives us an even more obvious example. The tree that bends to the wind survives the storm. To resist, mountain break, and live this way, instead of trying to fit into a mold. Wise man style, or serious philosopher, he laughed at himself, ignorance, and wrote without commitment, with an absolute truth. He let the thought flow. The result, your essays, written almost spontaneously, influenced generations of thinkers, de Nietzsche to Pascal. This raises an essential question: how to apply this principle in modern life? Most people, lives trapped in a fixed story. They say, I am like this, I can't change, I have to have this person, or I will never be happy. If it doesn't happen as I planned, I'm ruined. Montaigne saw these certainties as illusions. For him, the classic wisdom of the ability to ask, say, things don't have to be exactly the way I imagined it to be. And if I can live well, even without what I thought I needed, and if on release, I find something better, this type of questioning opens doors. It's the rigidity of the mind, and makes us realize that control was just a comfortable illusion. Knight expanded this idea with the concept of love fate, the love of destiny. It is not enough to accept the circumstances. We need to embrace them like everything is happening exactly as it should. Mountain attractions tell people stories who lived tormented by the fear of failure, of death or loss. But he noticed something curious, so they gave up fighting these fears. Something changed. Fear dissolves. The mind found a new way. Life settles better when we didn't try to fix it too much. It doesn't mean living irresponsibly, but rather act in the present without being paralyzed by the future. Somewhere now, at this very moment, someone is paralyzed in the face of one simple decision. He is analyzing, performing, pondering possibilities, and creating scenarios inside your own head. Time passes, the weight grows, and the only thing that really happens is hesitation, turning into habit. Mountain sends this type of behavior as one. Our life is made up more of hesitations of the what of actions, and he knew something that few realize. Endless thinking is no exception. It's fear disguised as Worrying less doesn't mean acting anyway. Means acting without clinging to the fear of making mistakes. Means giving up perfectionism, of anxiety and the illusion that we need to be 100 per 100 prepared before starting. Our problem is that most people reverse this logic. They believe that first, need to feel confident to act. But the truth is the opposite. Action comes before trust. Movement creates security, not the other way around. Fear of action works like a shadow. The more we run away from it, the bigger he becomes. Studies show that when we add something out of anxiety, the brain does not relieve. It amplifies the concern. The prefrontal cortex continues to ruminate on the problem, increasing the sense of threat. The result? Small challenges become mental monsters. Montaigne had noticed this for centuries. For him, the only remedy against fear was direct contact. What's us in the imagination rarely disturbs us in reality. This means that many times, the biggest mistake is not in acting and failing, is in never acting and living tormented by the ghost of the say. Mountain adopt a simple approach, but revolutionary for its time. He believed that thought should be understood, free and without the shackles of the with being right. Your method can be divided into 3 principles. Accept ignorance as a force. He said that our greatest wisdom is in recognizing how much we know little, and it eliminates the pressure of having all the answers before acting. The mistake ceases to be a failure and becomes a learning process. Exchange certainty for direct experience. Instead of getting stuck in theory, test on, practice and see what works. He defended that the deepest knowledge of experience, not the endless analysis. Treat life as an experiment, not like a final judgment. It reduces the weight of self-criticism and encourages the freedom to try. After all, everything can be adjusted and redone, minus time wasted with hesitation. These principles were part of that made Mountain different. While many philosophers of their time were with great universal truths, he focused on everyday life, in the fluidity of life and in the lightness of thought. Nietzsche, who drank directly from the mountain fountain, and expanded this idea with a powerful concept, the free spirit. For him, a truly free person does not care too much with the judgment of others, does not live trapped in foreign dogmas, and does not paralyze before the cloud. The Stoics reinforced this idea with a simple maxim: do whatever you can and ignore the rest. Modern science confirms this logic. Research shows that the action reduces anxiety. When we take a first step, same as small, the brain releases dopamine. Discover a ripple effect of motivation. The simple act of starting dissolves much of mental resistance. Mountain spent his life studying human nature and came to an essential conclusion. Happiness is not in solving all concerns, but in learning to live well in spite of them. He who learns to laugh at himself will never be without fun. Real wisdom is not absence of fear. It's not perfection. It's not absolute control. Is lightness in the face of chaos. In the end, it all comes down to a simple principle: less concern, more life. If you've come this far, it's because, somehow, this video made sense to you. Maybe you felt the weight of concern at some point in your life. Perhaps you have realized how excess thought can paralyze us more than prepare us. Or maybe you just enjoyed that philosophical journey and want more content like that. The truth is, creating videos like this takes time, research, and dedication. And if you want to support this work directly, are there some ways to do this? The first and simplest is to become a member of the channel. In addition to helping to keep this type of content on the air, you also gain access to exclusive benefits. But if you prefer a single support, you can use Super Tanks, which is a form of direct recognition by content that brought you value. Now, whether you cannot or do not want to contribute financially, no problem at all. The simple fact of watching, leave a comment and share already makes a huge difference. Because in the end, what really matters is this exchange of ideas, this quest for freer thinking, less sensitive and more present. So regardless of your choice, thanks for being here, and reminders if less concern, more life.